Good evening, folks. To anyone out there that might find themselves listening to this broadcast that I am making at this point in time at 11:23 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the 30th of May, 2020, I bid you greetings. This discussion I'm about to put forward is going to irritate some. It may have the possibility of opening the eyes of others. Some may even be happy or agree with what I'm about to talk about. But talk about it I'm going to do. Because that's one of the last freedoms we have in this country is the freedom of speech. So, for those of you who may or may not know me, let me give you a thumbnail sketch of my background and the community of the arts magical. My name, my birth name, is Douglas Eugene Helvey. I was born on the 9th of November, 1960, in the city of Kittanning in the state of Pennsylvania, of course, in the USA. By the time I was 8 in 1968, I was already experimenting with what little and few pieces of the realms of magic had started to become available to people. I'm not going to go into a large litany of that now, but I will say it was left-hand oriented. One thing about me that anybody who's known me can always say is I've always been forthright when speaking of my past. Anyway, over the years from 1968 on, I practiced left-hand path magic. Some people might call it Satanism. Some might call it Luciferianism. We really weren't using that particular word back then. But by the time I was 27, for reasons that are too lengthy to go into, I walked away from that particular path with holding no overwhelming ill feelings toward most of the practitioners that I had worked with. Walked away from it, I still did. In 1987, to be literally precise, on the 1st of May of 1987, I discovered the Wicca faith at a Wicca gathering put on by Drs. Gavin and Yvonne Frost of the Church and School of Wicca. That particular weekend gathering took place in a tiny hamlet of Mesick, North Carolina. That was the day I fully discovered the Wicca faith and found the path that I would follow virtually for 30 years, not longer. By the time 1990 had rolled around, and after completing most of the School of Wicca's courses, I had gotten initiated to my first degree in the Frost tradition on 03 March of 1990. By July of 1990, I formed my first coven, the Coven of the Eternal Harvest. Lo and behold, nobody ever told me that a first degree couldn't form a coven, so I went ahead and did it. By 1996, I had received the second degree from a group of witches I worked with in Durham, North Carolina. To be precise, it was the Stardust Circle Coven, or Stardust Circle Church. I would receive my third degree in 96, on 31 October of 96, from a group that operated out of Wilmington, North Carolina. Over the years, the eternal harvest, if they were all counted up at one time or another, we have had 16 covens. We have had covens in North Carolina. We have had covens in Wilmington, North Carolina, Jacksonville, North Carolina, Goldsboro, North Carolina. We have had covens in Georgia and a number of other places. I personally put my military career on the line in the mid-90s when I refuse to be silent about the fact that I was a devout practitioner of the old religion of Wicca. I would also later put my life on the line in defense of that faith when I formed different protest marches over the years to stand up for people who had their rights trampled on. But of course, not many people know about that, because not many people know about the work that I did to practically create the Wicca community in Jacksonville, North Carolina, or the similar work that my one-time friend David Smith was doing in Durham, North Carolina, and my late friend and spiritual colleague, Lord Ravenwind, was doing in Wilmington, North Carolina. We all had actually worked together at one point in time for a few years until disagreements, different thoughts, and different ideas where things should go created the schisms that sometimes do show up in our faith. But let me move on beyond that. My original teachers, Doctors Gavin and Yvonne Frost, the one thing they imparted to me that I have never forgotten is you never make it easy for somebody to become a witch. You're not born a witch. A witch is made. You may be born with the attributes, energies, or what one might call bloodlines to eventually become a witch. But my first teachers said a witch is made, a witch is not born. So from here on out, I speak from that mindset and that framework. And at this point, some of you may be shutting this down, especially since I'm live. Or if anybody picks this up, they maybe shut it down at this time. I am not, and have never been, a politically correct Wiccan. I myself consider myself an elitist. An elitist because I believe a Wiccan is trained and mentored by a master witch, a master teacher. Put whatever words you want there. A Lord High Priest, a Lady High Priestess, a Witch Queen, or a Magus. You do not become a witch through the internet. You may receive training to become a witch through the internet. But there are no such things as overnight witches. There are no such things as you get your first, second, and third degree in a weekend. That is utter hogwash. Utter hogwash. And this is one of the very same things that has created schisms in the 40 years of development that our community has undergone. Nothing worthwhile is given freely. You should never become a witch unless you have suffered the blood, the sweat, and the tears of the training. If your training was easy, it wasn't worth your while. If your training was hard and your teachers made you work for what you got, then it was worthy of being taught to you. Anything less is tomfoolery. So let's move forward. Over all the years, I'm going to blow my own horn. I kind of don't care at this point. Over all these years, I've actually done more for this community than probably 95% of it even know about or care about. However, at the end of this discussion, I'm also going to acknowledge those greater than I who, in my opinion, have done more at the end of my discussion. What I'm going to talk about is the foolishness, the tomfoolery, the idiocy, the garbage, the laughable ignorance that has become Wicca as it's being practiced nowadays. And I look straight into this computer and tell you, whoever you may be looking at this point in time, I am 59 years old and I could care less what you may think about my thoughts on this issue, because guess what, folks? They're my thoughts. And as somebody who has supported this community since 1987, they're my thoughts to share. And if you don't like them, you know what you can do with that. Now, what is being practiced as Wicca nowadays? Or what has been added to Wicca nowadays that is some of the most utter foolishness that I will have ever seen in my life? One thing is the furry movement. Frankly, I think y'all are a bunch of nuts. And that's what I'm saying. That's what Doug Helvey is telling you. The furry movement is a bunch of damn nuts that go around dressed as animals, not wearing a face mask as an animal that might be utilized in a witchcraft rite, but dressing as a chipmunk or a fucking squirrel or a rabbit or whatever. You idiots need to get your own playground and keep your stupid trash out of Wicca. There, I said that. First, I've insulted the furries. Next, I'm going to insult Zia Budapest and her bullshit that she put more hatred against men in the Wicca community and has done more damage to men in the Wicca community than any other practicing female Wiccan that I honestly can think of in my mind. She took an original beautiful concept of Dianic Wicca and she turned it into her own soapbox of anti-male hatred that has done more harm to the men in this community than anything else I've ever seen. Thanks, bitch, for what you did. And nothing you can do nowadays can erase the years and years of anti-male hysteria that you put into this community. Think about that next time you look at your son. More issues I have a problem with. At one time, Wicca, covens, we sometimes would get into arguments. And yeah, the occasional witch war. Most of the time it was over, believe it or not, how witchcraft was practiced. Not that some of the fights were the smartest in the world. And frankly, I ended up in a couple of those fights. And in one particular situation, I was on the wrong end, and I openly acknowledge it. I stuck up for the wrong person, and it actually cost me some, what you might call my Wiccan cred. Cost me some of my Wiccan cred. And I'll go ahead and use that bastard's name right now, and I don't care who finds out about it. The name he went by at the time was Shane Humacher. He was an utter charlatan, and he himself did enough damage to the Eastern North Carolina community that years later, the damage he did is still being acknowledged as damage, as I'm doing now. Other things I've seen enter the Wiccan community. Superheroes. That's right. Superheroes in the 4 directions. You got it. Aquaman in the West. Who knows? Wonder Woman in the South. Things of this nature. I have actually, at times past, heard, and this is actually no disrespect to this particular subject because I myself am a Trekkie, but I've actually heard of people using different Star Trek characters in their directions. And I just shook my head like, you're nuts. You're effing nuts. Last time I looked, the things that go in the 4 directions are either recognition of spiritual totem animals, the elemental kingdoms, or simply the name of the directions or the element. Yeah. Once again, I'm an elitist. I believe witchcraft should be witchcraft, not tomfoolery, or stupidity for that matters. I have seen so many different things that Wicca has become nowadays that I openly admit to a certain degree it breaks my heart. I have seen Wiccan gatherings become social events and not events to worship the god and the goddess as utter equals, which they should be worshipped as. No, I've seen them become orgy fests for degenerates who decided to screw everything they could get their hands on, talk about it in front of children. Yes, I'm saying that on this discussion. I'm laying it all on the line, folks. I'm laying it on the line even for people who might know what Wicca is nowadays. I'm telling you like it is. Wicca has become a social function. Wiccans nowadays, a lot of them, they have become what I call the Wiccan version of Christmas and Easter Christians. They are Beltane and pagan Wiccans. They've got no reverence for the gods, or if they do, it's very little and hard to find. All they care about is their little tchotchkes. All they care about is their latest little figurine that they picked up at a pagan gathering. You ask them a simple question. Ask them about any of the history, any of the ancestors, of the people who came before them that put their very lives on the line to bring this faith forward into the 20th century, and they look at you like you got a horn growing out of the center of your forehead. You ask them who Doreen Valiente was. You ask them who Margaret Alice Murray was. You ask them who Gerald Gardner was. You ask them who Dolores Ashcroft Nowicki is. These fools don't have a clue. They couldn't rent a clue. All they know is what they found on the internet in somebody's latest bullshit podcast, who they themselves usually don't know their asses from a hole in the ground, and they're calling that witchcraft. I have seen more bad-mouthing of some of the hardest working people in the witchcraft community than you could care to want to know. I have seen Lori Cabot of Salem, Massachusetts, the first woman who had the ovaries enough to bring witchcraft into the light of day when even people like me were kids. I have seen people badmouth her to no end, not even knowing the risks she was taking to bring this faith to light. And of all places, Salem, Massachusetts. Very few people nowadays take the time to thank her for her efforts. Very few people nowadays take time to thank the memory of Raymond Buckland, who brought Alexandrian Wicca, I apologize, Gardnerian Wicca, to the United States. They forget about Alexander Sanders, also known as Alex Sanders, who was the founder of Alexandrian Wicca. These people, all of them were human. They all had their faults. But they were dedicated to witchcraft like none other. Their dedication back then, the quote dedication of some people nowadays would pale in comparison to the work and dedication these people put in for our craft. And yet, a lot of people don't even know who I'm talking about. And you know why? Because you're utter fools. You're fools who don't want to carry the names and memories of these people, these ancestors, forward. No, instead, you'd rather run around in your stupid ass furry outfits or wearing your little fairy wings like some costume wearing idiot, or you'd rather play your cosplay bullshit and call it witchcraft. Sorry, folks, real witchcraft is beyond that. Most of you wouldn't know real witchcraft if it jumped up and bit you in the ass. That's right. I said most of you wouldn't know real witchcraft if it jumped up and bit you in the damn ass. But no, when this is all over with, he's a hater. You know what? You're right. I hate stupidity. I hate what Wicca has become. Do I still consider myself Wiccan? You're damn right. Because none of you people out there can take the truth of that faith away from me. Not a one. I would dare you to try. I'd run over you like a brick wall. I can't stand the cowards that now call themselves Wiccans, but yet hide behind the shadow of hiding. It's long overdue. If you are what you claim to be, claim it with all of your being. Don't hide behind a curtain of fear. If you're really Wiccan, come out. Come on. Come out. Come out. Come on out and play. Play the real game. Play the game of having your career put on the line because you refuse to remove Wicca from your dog tags. Go ahead. Most of you don't have the courage it would take to run a piss-ants motorcycle around the inside of a Cheerio. And I will stand by my words. What else is going on, gentlemen and ladies? Guess what, folks? The Wiccan community was originally conservative. Believe it or not. Our forefathers and foremothers, yeah, they may have liked their nudity. Why not? I see nothing wrong with skyclad. Don't practice it myself, but the human body is the human body. And by and large, we shouldn't be ashamed of it. But everything has its place. But the Wicca I have seen being practiced nowadays, I have both, and I openly say this, I have both been ostracized by a greater portion of this community, and I have simultaneously walked away from it, by and large, on my own. Because somehow, this community has become top-heavy with politically correct nut jobs that give more shit about somebody's right to dress up in a puppy suit, or they give more care about what pronoun somebody is supposed to use to describe somebody in the LGBT community, which I have no problem with. Whether you folks know about it or not, I've stood up for you for years. But the people standing up for everything else have forgotten one of the most things to stand up for and be counted as, and that's witches, Wiccans, practitioners of the old religion. Guess what? You have lost your fucking way, folks. You've lost your way, and you have lost, and I've seen this over the years, you have actually lost some of your strongest supporters. At one point in time in my, quote, Wiccan career, I would have given the shirt off my back for a brother or sister in this community. Frankly, nowadays, I wouldn't lend my shirt to them because most of them have become useless, self-righteous, uneducated ne'er-do-wells. Frankly, a lot of them don't have a pot to piss in or a door to throw it out, but then they find fault with people who have, to whatever degree or another, how it has occurred, have a decent roof over their head. Maybe have been blessed by the gods and the goddesses and actually can pay their bills. But what they now do is they ostracize people like me that consider themselves conservative witches. Oops, I used that evil word. I'm a conservative. And if anybody out there cares to know or wants to know what that word means to me, it means that I believe in all of my constitutional rights, and I will fight to the death to preserve them. Yep, and if that makes me crazy, so be it. I'm crazy. I believe in freedom of speech. I even believe in the freedom of speech for you nutburgers out there that would try to take away my freedom of speech. Because guess what, folks? Freedom of speech is that, freedom of speech. I would not try to shut yours down, nor should you try to shut mine down. That's how it really works in the America I was raised in. I don't know about the one you was raised in. I believe in the freedom of assembly. That means if a Christian church can assemble, a Wiccan coven can assemble, or a Jewish people can celebrate at the Jewish temple. I actually believe in freedom of religion, but it means all religions. Guess what? Even people who practice the left-hand path, Satanism. Over the years, I've seen a lot of Wiccans down their noses at practitioners of the left-hand path, Satanism, Luciferianism, and so forth. But guess what, folks? Some of them people have more ethics in their background and in their conscience than a lot of you will ever even strive to have. That's right. Now I'm sticking up for the Satanists and the left-hand pathers, because at least they have a framework they use. Most Wiccans I know nowadays have no framework of ethics at all. They'll go to a gathering, and I have lost track of the number of people I've seen at gatherings with wedding bands on their fingers and literally look at me and say, "Oh, I'm married, but for this weekend, I'm practicing. I'm in an open marriage for the weekend." I've heard terminology like that, and I just look at them like, "So you're not honoring your wedding vows, regardless of where they were made." I have seen people come to pagan gatherings with one agenda and one agenda only: to get laid by anybody. And I mean anybody that will have them. Now, I'm not going to be a hypocrite. In my early years, I went to pagan gatherings and I was popular. I was popular with some of the ladies. And you know what? But that did not take place. That was not the most important reason I was at these events. I was at these events to be around the people that were some of the earliest movers and shakers in our community. I wanted to learn from the teachers. I wanted to go to the classes. The fun I had later on in the evening, hey, call it icing on the cake, whatever you want. But there's a difference between that and having your only agenda is to attend an orgy, or as some of the politically correct pagan terminology was, the tantric tent. Yeah, tantric tent. Fancy word for here's where we're all going to go get in a pile and see who ends up on top. Okay, I say the little lightheartedly. If a person was truly in an open marriage, I don't hold them at fault. That's their adult decision. The ones I hold at fault are the ones that knowingly cheated on their spouses who wouldn't have appreciated it. So that's another bitch I've got with the magical community. No sense of ethics whatsoever, at least with the greater portion of you losers. Other beefs I've got with the magical community. For the longest time, although with the help of Lady Selena Fox, this issue started to get corrected, a lot of you held your nose up at military veterans. That's right, the people that defend this country or have put their lives on the line for this country. Yet you little hippie wannabes had the fucking nerve to hold us in some kind of disrespect because we had to carry a weapon at one time. You know what I call you? I call you cowards. Those of us that carried the weapon so you cowards wouldn't have to, I loathe you. I loathe you with every fiber of my being. If you hate veterans, you've got more of a problem than ethics. You got a problem of the highest social order. You're idiots. Veterans have put their lives on the line ever since this country existed. And you don't have the guts to stand toe-to-toe with a veteran. Point taken, point given. And that's why if you still hate veterans, trust me, I hate the ground you walk on. Oh, that's right. I used the word hate. Ooh, I used the word hate. That's right. There are different groups of people I hate. And guess what? That fucking hate keeps me warm at night. By the way, if you didn't catch it at the beginning, I'm a Scorpio. Actually, my wife told me I'm a quadruple Scorpio. It's an astrology thing. So I earn every one of them quadruples. I will love those that stand by me. I will respect those that at least respect my point of view. You don't even have to agree with it. But if you ostracize me, you dare to hold your nose up at me because I want a wall built on our southern border to protect our nation, you go straight to hell or Hades or whatever the hell you want to call it. If you hate me for who I voted for, screw you. You don't pay my taxes. You don't pay my house payment. You haven't shed the blood and the sweat and the tears that I've had trying to keep people alive that were shot up on the battlefield. So yes, I disagree with you. In a lot of areas, I disagree vehemently. But the one thing I cannot stomach and I cannot stand is the very fact that people like me that have my values, and guess what, folks? There's still some of us out there. We're the very people that under normal circumstances would come to your defense if need be. But guess what, losers? Those days are gone. I would not come to the defense of the average Wiccan no more than I would come to the defense of a worm hanging on a fishing hook. As long as you hold your viewpoints toward those of us who have been warriors, who have our opinions that, oh my goodness, might be contrary to what you have. As long as you have those opinions, if the shit ever really hits the fan, you punk ass losers are on your own. Don't come crying to me. Don't come to my house that has 25 weapons in it, because I will literally run you off at gunpoint because your life isn't worth saving because of what you have put me through and people like me. We're the people that did the work. You losers have done virtually nothing, and I mean nothing, to earn the right to be called a witch or even a Wiccan. That's how I feel about you. And you know what? This may not even get viewed by anybody, but it's my catharsis. It's my new game plan, because guess what, folks? Galen Firestorm is coming back, and not a one of you has the power to stop me. I'm coming back to teach witchcraft, deeper witchcraft that your sorry little computer-oriented self can't even begin to understand. I'm coming back, and I'm going to teach the kind of witchcraft that only the brave of heart dare touch. And frankly, chicken shits aren't welcome. So be advised, when I do start teaching again, I'm going to have some very strict rules, like I have in the past. And if anybody approaches me to be taught, albeit once you see this, it may not be anybody for all I know, I'm coming back with a vengeance. I'm going to teach witchcraft in the Helvetian way. I'm going to teach witchcraft in the ways that might scare some people. Ooh. Oh well, get over it. Because Lord, High Priest, Galen Firestorm is coming back full tilt boogie. And guess what? There's not a damn thing any of you can do about it. Now that I've ran my mouth for a while, I'm going to take some time to do a litany of people who have been the movers and shakers in the witchcraft community over the years. All of them I respect. Not all of them do I agree with, but all of them I respect, whether they respect me or not. So begins my litany. If anyone deserving of this litany does not get mentioned, I have only so much paper to write on. I ask forgiveness if any truly deserving of this litany are not mentioned in it. With that, I begin my litany of those people who have passed into the halls of the ancestors. Dr. Margaret Alice Murray, one of the earliest movers and shakers of the idea and the perception of witchcraft being a real thing. She wrote God of the Witches and the Witch Cult in Western Europe, which was a follow-up to God of the Witches. Some would later discredit some of her writings as not accurate, but I go on record as saying I'm actually been a Murrayite most of my witchcraft practice, and I still respect her work. Doreen Valiente, the late Doreen Valiente, a woman who was also a little-known war hero, and some have gone as far as to suggest strongly that she may have been a spy for MI6 during World War II. Doreen Valiente, as far as I'm concerned, is the mother of modern witchcraft or modern Wicca. Hail, Doreen Valiente. Hail, Margaret Murray. Alex Sanders, the late, the creator with his wife, Maxine Sanders, who is still with us, thank the gods, of Alexandrian Wicca. Yes, he was a bit of a colorful character. Anybody who's read anything on him will know that. But you know what? He practiced what he preached, and he followed what he believed in, as does his Maxine Sanders, his wife, who is still with us. Hail, Alexander Sanders. Hail, Maxine Sanders. The late Gerald Brousseau Gardner, the creator of what at one time was considered an insult, but later on became an honored term, the creator of Gardnerian Wicca, which was brought to the United States by Raymond Buckland, the late Raymond Buckland, of who Wicca in the United States owes a great debt of gratitude to. A lot of people would easily and eagerly consider Gerald Brousseau Gardner the grand old man of our modern witchcraft. I would agree with that. I would consider the late Gerald B. Gardner the grand old man of modern Wicca. But after his passing, I personally felt that Raymond Buckland deserved the title of the grand old man of the Wicca movement in the United States. I don't believe he ever personally accepted anything along with that title because, as would be the course of events, it would probably have some baggage that would go with it. But I personally considered Raymond Buckland a kind of grand old man image for the early Wicca movement in the United States. Then I'm going to mention my late teacher and my first contact in Wicca, Dr. Gavin Frost, originally from the United Kingdom. I was taught his version of witchcraft, of Wicca, that was taught by him and his currently still living, thank the goddess, wife, Yvonne Frost. To the Frost movement, for reasons I'm not even going to go into now, I have been persona non grata for many years. That's okay. That's fine. But they were still my first teachers. And whether Yvonne herself knows this right now, I still hold her and her late husband, Gavin, in high regards. Our differences do not delineate or do not separate my respect for the two of you. Another mover and shaker in the early Wicca movement was Dr. Leo Martello. He practiced a form of Sicilian witchcraft that would take on some other names later in the future that I'm not going to bother going into now, but he was also a mover and shaker in our community. And yes, I said the late Dr. Leo Martello. The next person I would like to mention is Scott Cunningham. Scott Cunningham was an early mover and shaker in the Wicca movement. As a matter of fact, he himself wrote numerous books on the subject, and although I never considered myself a practitioner in the sense that he described, but one of his books I enjoyed the most was his book on solitary Wicca. He wrote an awesome book on solitary Wicca that actually I learned some interesting things out of that. But I did learn to at least respect the idea of a person practicing on their own. So, hail Gavin Frost. Hail Yvonne Frost. Hail Dr. Leo Martello. Hail Scott Cunningham. Hail Raymond Buckland. Other people who were great movers and shakers in this community was Lady Sheba. Hail Lady Sheba. Another person who was a mover and shaker in our community, but mostly a prolific writer on the subject, was Dr. Hans Holzer. Dr. Hans Holzer himself was a significant contributor to the development of our faith. Hail, Dr. Hans Holzer. Sybil Leek, the founder of the Horsa tradition in the United States, the person who would go on to use the word witchcraft more than Wicca. And actually, she used the word Wicca at least infrequently. Most of the time, she described what she practiced as witchcraft, and rightfully so. Sybil Leek was definitely a character. I've actually read plenty of her books. I've seen her work. I've seen some of her interviews. Her and her jackdaw, her bird, Lightfoot, I think he was called Lightfoot Jackson. Interesting, very interesting person. She did a lot of work with Dr. Hans Holzer. Her Horsa tradition, I believe, should be held in high honor. The Caddick tradition after that, not so much. That's all I'll say about that. Patricia Crowther and her husband, they did a lot of work and were movers and shakers in the craft movement. Hail Patricia Crowther. Stuart Farrar, one of the people who would bring forward the Alexandrian tradition, at least primarily in the UK, with obvious influence taking place in the United States. Him and what would at his time have been his wife did a lot of work, untold amounts of work to bring the Wicca movement forward. His wife is currently remarried, practicing a different form of Wicca that, in all honesty, at this moment in time, I can't remember the name of it. But they are to be commended for their efforts to help build the Wicca movement. Some lesser known names, depending on who you talk to. I would like to thank, I do believe she is passed, Louise Huebner. Louise Huebner was simply a witch. She didn't claim to be a Wiccan. She didn't claim to believe in multiple specific gods or goddesses. She practiced witchcraft in witchcraft's name. And some might have called what she practiced a little on the dark side. Oh well. She deserves recognition. Also, one of my teachers that deserves recognition is the late Peter Padden. He's the late Peter Padden, and his wife Linda Padden are responsible for teaching me the English cunning craft. Hail, Peter Padden. Hail, Linda Padden. I also wish to pay my respects to the late Isaac Bonowitz for his work in the community. I also wish to pay my respects to the late, as some people would have called him, horrible Herman Slater. Herman Slater did a lot for the community in the state of New York, and his work should also be remembered. People that are currently living that I wish to give, I guess some people would call a shout out to, and to pay my respects to for your work in the community that has transformed or helped at least some of us nowadays who live nowadays. The shout outs I want to give to are Lori Cabot of Salem, Massachusetts. Hail, Lori Cabot. I want to give a shout out to Christian Day, owner of the Hex store in both New Orleans and Salem, Massachusetts. Your work and eccentricities are appreciated by some of us. You and I don't agree on everything, but that's okay with me. I still think you've done a lot of good work. Christopher Penzak, awesome man. You've done a lot for the community. Hail Christian Day. Hail Christopher Penzak. Selena Fox and her husband Dennis. This lady has done more for our community and for military veterans than probably a lot of people realize. Hail Selena Fox. Hail Dennis. Orion Foxwood. You've done so much for the fairy tradition and for the practice of old school witchcraft. Then I think, frankly, a lot of people probably give you credit for. But I want to take the moment in time to give you credit for what you've done. Hail Orion Foxwood. Hail Ed Fitch, writer of the Rites of the Crystal Well. You've done more for the community, at least in its early days, than most people know or even understand. Hail Gemma Gary of the United Kingdom. You've helped bring Cunningcraft forward in many ways. Hail Robin Artisan of Old School Witchcraft. I thank you for your works and for some of your early writings that guided some of my own path work into old witchcraft. A shout out and a hail to Ann and Dave Finnan of California. Your early work in the entirety of the craft movement is appreciated by some of us. It's greatly appreciated by me. And Lady Gypsy of Salem. Your work, your music, both deserve a hail. Hail Gypsy. And hail to the music of Lady Enchantress. Thank all of you for your time. Thank you to whoever might listen to this all the way through, whether you agree with me or not. Thank you to the Lord, as I call him Hearn, and to the lady I know as Ellen. And thanks to the Witch Father Baphomet, who guides the path I walk on the path of old witchcraft. And to those of you who this might mean anything to, blessed be. Have a good day. Douglas Helvey is out.